All right, so we'll call the meeting to order for today. We don't yet have a quorum. Oh, we might now. And Zuzi, can you start us off with a roll call?
Recording in progress.
Emmett Hopkins,
I'm here.
Alex Goodman. Looks like he's not here today. Dana Allen. Joshua Somit. Kenna Lee. Lisa Pierce. Looks like she's not here today. Deborah Burns. She's also absent. Sonali Shanti. Here, Zeno Switjink.
Yeah.
And then we have Ambrosia Thompson.
Present.
And we have Everett Fernandez. He's also not here. Diana Rich.
Present.
And Sandra Maurer. And she's also absent.
All right, so I think we have a quorum, and I have a very brief inspiration for today. I asked my new work team to send me inspiring quotes, and then I forgot to write any of them down. So this is just an old standby from Rebecca Solnit as we enter into fire season. And I noticed the tenor of the mood of the community starting to get a little more anxious. Inside the word emergency is emerge. From an emergency, new things come forth. The old certainties are crumbling fast, but danger and possibility are sisters. So I think all of us working inside the climate movement have seen how these tipping points that can be so terrifying also allow for, especially like create these windows for change. So if you subscribe to the theory of change, of kind of critical windows, we're in one, and there's a lot happening. And it's exciting to be a part of this moment in time where so many people are stepping up. All right, that's my inspiration for today. Joshua, do you have a review of action items?
Sure, thank you. What I have for action items from last time, there's a little bit of follow-up on the electrification survey. I know there was a discussion about posting and sharing the results online, but that was somewhat dependent on presenting to City Council and potentially regional agencies thereafter. And then there was also whether or not we were mustering for the Gravenstein Apple Fair. And I know Ambrosia was holding the Recology booth there, but we weren't sure if the climate table was going to come together. And I believe that was it.
Yeah, so we decided not to move forward with trying to take Ambrosia's very generous invitation due to lack of manpower capacity for that event. But thank you for the invitation. And anyone from planning want to speak to the process around the survey posting?
Yes, so that's part of the planning department's update. If we want to wait, okay.
Do we have any comments from the public regarding items not on the agenda today?
Hi, all. I just wanted to apologize at the end of the committee. I do want to say that I did go back to the store and apologize, and also show them a detailed spec sheet of the device they could install and other stores could install. It's basically a fan curtain that blows air straight down, keeps the bugs out, saves 80% of the loss that would otherwise happen from having the door wide open by blasting the AC. So just to let you have an update. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. And your apologies have been accepted, and we will accept no more from you. We're grateful for the work that you do. And that resource sounds like a great thing that we may want to put on the website, which we'll be discussing a little later in the meeting. So that's a resource that I think a lot of people probably aren't aware of. And that, I think Ambrosia, you attend some of the local like business type meetings. Yeah, that might be a great resource to share there too. All right. Anyone else want to address anything that's not on the agenda? Oh, vast public. Okay. That's Steve Pierce on the screen is not Lisa, is it? Okay, just checking. All right. Any statements of conflict of interest from members of the committee today? All right, I see none. So we'll move on to the planning department report.
All right. So in regards to the electrification survey results, those were sent to the city council for one of their last meetings. I don't think it was the last one, the one prior to that. I can't remember. I can pull up the date here in a few minutes. But staff is asking that as part of that survey results that we submitted to city council, that the Climate Action Committee would come back with some further actions and recommendations to City Council from those results. So staff is asking that if it would be possible for somebody from the Climate Action Committee or Energy Working Group to present that at the October 3rd City Council meeting. That would be wonderful. If not, it would be, the next one would be October 17th, but that agenda is filling up pretty quick. So the October 3rd would be the most ideal one.
Steve, are you representing Energy today? Yeah. And would that be possible?
Please.
You can just sit at a table if you need to. It might be easier because we are going to be discussing electrification later on the agenda. Okay.
We thought that we were actually going to be out of town today, and we're not going to be having an action item on the agenda. So I think there was some miscommunication there. Since there wasn't any written material in advance for the committee to approve or provide suggestions to in terms of next steps, it seems like if that's necessary, then we would have a hard time meeting that Thursday if we're going to come back again for our committee to say, yes, we agree, these are our next steps we'd like to pursue.
Well, my opinion, and I'm open to ideas from other committee members, is that there was already discussion. We just didn't take an action item of passing forward like the recommended actions as an official take it to council. So I don't think we need a presentation on the survey again and kind of what the things are, but I don't know what other people feel about whether we need. Yeah, go ahead.
I think we could just get a email with the results, the final, because what we got before was just a draft, right?
No, we just took the word draft out. That was the final results. And it included some kind of cursory next steps that were really more around disseminating the results of the survey. But from what John Jay was saying, it sounds like we want to go a little more than that. We want to get an idea of what other next steps. And I'm prepared to present some draft next steps to you all today. But in terms of an action item that would be ready for the third, that's good.
I think it's fine for us to just talk about talk about the next steps, as long as we've already approved of the framework, we've already read the survey results. If the next steps are in alignment with the framework and in alignment with what we've already learned from the survey results, I feel comfortable moving that forward to a council presentation within the framework that staff is requesting. Anything else from planning?
Yes. Later on this evening, we will be having a update from SCTA and Fair and Peers, who's working on the countywide active transportation plan. they're submitting a milestone update to our planning commission tonight. So if anybody's interested in that, it will be in this room about an hour after this meeting ends. And they will be also kind of explaining some of their next steps in the process of that whole plan for the countywide plan. And it also includes individual jurisdiction plans. So Sebastopol will have their own kind of individual plan that is connected with the countywide plan. And they'll be working on providing community engagement throughout the whole process. So there will be multiple times where they will be doing outreach at, farmers markets, kind of public engagement like that. And then also having virtual environments to provide input, and then also setting up surveys and other things like that to gather the public's needs as far as bike and pedestrian stuff goes. The other question that I did have that Carrie wanted me to ask
Hold on one
was,
second.
Oh,
Does
sorry.
anybody have questions about the SCTA? Like, I'm assuming transport people are already looped in, or?
Yeah, there was a plan to appoint a citizen representative to that committee that is dealing with that on the staff level. And I think last time you mentioned that this was in the coming. When is it happening?
So that was the other item on City Council's agenda for the September 5th meeting, was to open the recruitment to appoint a citizen representative. So I believe that was approved in that meeting. And the next step would be to create the call for that person and then open the recruitment, and then go through the regular recruitment process where it's open for a few weeks, I believe it is, and then goes through interviews through City Council.
And does that automatically happen because, like, is that opening the recruitment, or is that something this group is supposed to take any action on?
No, so it would be the City Council approved the recruitment request that staff had provided. So we'll be creating kind of a recruitment letter and getting that out, and then accepting applications. To be like any other standard committee member applying for a group.
Great, thank you. Any other questions about the SCTA active transport planning process? Okay, I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you.
You're fine.
I had a question.
Go ahead.
So we still have a plan that is old from 2011-14. Is there any work plan that fits the current plan? Or are we kind of on hold in terms of creating improvement in town until the plan is changed?
I believe they'll be looking at that plan that was approved in 2014, I think it was.
Right.
And then offering suggestions to improve that plan with the current ATP process. It is kind of on the city to make sure that they make the implementation of those plans. So we might be looking at potential grant funding or stuff like that to get those upgrades or updates to our bike and pedestrian plan in the future.
Yeah, but maybe I'm not clear. So the old plan has also proposals to improve infrastructure. Are some of these still thought about, or are we kind of on hold until we create a new plan?
I would say they're probably on hold to make sure that, if they do align with what's already in place and not kind of double dipping as far as improvements go. We don't want to make an improvement, spend a bunch of money, and then do it somewhere else as well. So to do kind of one overall improvement plan, then doing it in a couple different phases. So I would say we would probably have the current plan on hold until this, the one that SCTA is developing is complete, and then potentially doing both of them.
So when is the new plan going to be finalized?
The plan is projected to be finalized in February of 25.
So that's like 1.5 years from
Yeah.
now. So we're not doing anything in between.
Not that I'm aware of. If there's anything other that the engineering department might be working on as well, I'm happy to work with them to see if they have any projects proposed as part of that original bike and pedestrian plan.
Thank you. That's helped to get the timeline. Okay, please continue on.
The last question that I had before I turn it over to Zuzi real quick, staff wanted to know, was there any compost that was left over from the last giveaway? I think it was it last week ago? Mhm.
And it looks like maybe a tiny bit could be scraped up or at least cleaned up. But if you walk around the building, you could
Okay.
assess it better.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, we had just a couple questions come in from the public that said that they were out of town and wanted to know if, there was anything left from the last event. So just responding back to those folks.
Yeah, I mean, we could address that further in the working group reports. That in essence, about 2/3 of it went that morning. And I think probably what's left now, you'd have to bring a rake and a flat shovel, and it would be mixed with gravel and that sort of thing. So the easiest answer is we'll do it again in a few weeks if they really want it.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right. I will turn it over to Zuzi. She has some updates for the website.
Yeah, so just real quick, let me just share my screen here. I think this would be the page. Let me share. So we want to go to the Sustainable Sebastopol page. Carrie and I have been updating this since last week, and she really wanted the Climate Action Committee to upload or give suggestions on what we can change. We've taken out a lot of like outdated information, things about DVD players, stuff from like 2004, 2010, but it really needs like more text, photos, links to resources that you guys have. And then over time, I could be uploading that. And that's all.
Susie, what form, do you want individual committee members to be emailing you individually with suggestions, or do you want there to be kind of compendium compiling? Like how do you guys need that?
I think the best way of if there was a representative among you guys, like so you guys are all agreeing, so it's not like constant changing. Somebody says this, somebody says that. It's like agreed upon changes, and then I can update the website.
So maybe it makes most sense for us to bring our suggested changes to the next meeting, and then we can submit them all together.
I had a question about that, Kenna. I do have a list that I put together quite a long time ago that is reference documents that show historical actions taken to address climate action issues in Sebastopol. I forwarded that on to the, I think, Education Committee. Anyway, is that in someone's possession that might be able to be assessed, or is that something I should bring to the committee to discuss when we're all in a group discussing it?
And that was like a year and a half ago, maybe?
Yeah,
Something
but
like that.
those were historical, all the various actions with links, because it was pretty impressive what the city and the Climate Action Group has done. I can pull it up and maybe just forward it to you and you can figure out.
Would be great.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right. So does anyone have questions about the website? Do you want to share that again and just take us on a little tour? Like 3 minutes of here's your new website.
Okay. Let's share the screen here. Okay, so we changed this. I don't remember what it used to be called, but it's now Climate Action Framework, and it has all the policies.
I'm sorry, could we
Sebastopol.
maybe start on the landing page for Climate Action Committee? Or maybe the homepage and
The
then
homepage?
take us to the landing page?
Oh,
I like
let's
Kenna's idea of a little tour.
see. Tour. Let's go to. Here's the Climate Action Committee. Okay, here's the website. So we haven't changed anything on here yet. So this is pretty much the same. Let's go through here. And of course, we have the overview, the meeting page, and special projects. So if you guys want to check those out. And these are all things that can be updated. Now we're going to go back to the Sustainable Sebastopol. We've
So
added.
how did you navigate to this Sustainable Sebastopol page?
So at the moment, I haven't put a link yet to your Climate Action Committee page, but that's actually a good idea now that I'm here. So to get to the Sustainable Sebastopol page, you would have to go to our community, which is on the very top, and click on Sustainability and Conservation Measures. And from there, you would get to the Sustainable Sebastopol page. I will work on putting a link as well. So once we're on this page, we have the Climate Action Framework. I included the electrification survey on the top, and it also has like a download feature here. We have leadership and innovation, and Diana was talking about historical actions. I've already started working on past actions, so that's like a wonderful information that we would need. I also included relative resolutions and ordinances there. Let's keep going down a little quick. We got metrics. I believe Carrie really wanted to know if you guys had any sort of metrics that we could add here. Because we only had I believe this is kind of like older information in this section. There's water conservation, which links to the Bayron Water Upgrade Saves program. There's water quality, energy conservation and alternate energy. A lot of things that could use updating, and more text, photos, links, green building program. We have the waste reduction and recycling here. There's natural disasters and emergency management, local foods and agriculture. That could be a good place to put more stuff. What you can do, I've taken away a lot of the older information, like CFL light bulbs and DVD players that isn't really relevant at this moment. Let's see, useful links here. We also need more links here. And knowledgeable base and communication. So that's like a quick overview of the current page.
And so for the useful links section, if you guys have any links for like nonprofit groups or anything like that, that would be helpful to put in that section there. Because I think it's only got one or two things in there. So it'd be helpful for that section.
Great. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so what is missing is an update of the working group composition, right? Who is the contact person? Who is not on the working group anymore? New people that joined the working groups. That's still frozen in time there, right? So that would be good to do something about that.
I think that's my responsibility, so I will follow up.
So Ken, I had just a comment looking at the website. I know that you're still in the putting it all together stage. It's kind of amazing how far it's gone, honestly. Anyway, yeah, looking at the navigating from your government to boards, commissions, and committees, I can see that there's an option, a box for Climate Action Committee, and yeah, having a link that goes from that site to the sustainability and conservation measures site, specifically the Sustainable Sebastopol subgroup, I think would be really, really helpful. Because that has a lot of important information for anyone who's interested in climate action. So I'm glad you've already thought of that, just kind of reinforcing it.
Is staff question for you guys. Is there any reason we couldn't have like a Google document that people were contributing to? I'm just thinking Brown Act wise, contributing ideas and links to, as long as it was just a clearinghouse to be presented at the next meeting so that we're not all duplicating work, like coming up with the same links.
I'm not sure how it works with documents like that. So I would have to check. But I mean, if you guys send in your stuff to us individually, I mean, we can create an Excel sheet and then just delete duplicates. I know it's kind of what you're trying to get rid of, but I don't know how the Google Doc stuff works with Brown Act violations on committee stuff like that. So
So I just reinforce John Jay's instinct about this. It's just, there's too much opportunity for it to be perceived or actually result in engaging kind of an instinctive approval or disapproval of what's going to be involved. And check, and maybe John Jay and Carrie can come up with some way to navigate it, but I bet that's what we're going to be told. Send it all through John Jay, and then he can distribute it.
I mean, I was thinking we could actually post the link to the Google Doc on the website while we're working on it so that it's publicly available and then anyone could go in there and add. But it's fine. But we don't have to send it to you guys individually. Doesn't seem like maybe the best use of staff
The working
time.
groups would
Yeah.
And they don't need any Brown Act issues.
Yeah.
So we could ask the working groups to get the input together. Right?
I think that's a
And then
great idea.
avoiding duplication.
Yeah, seems better. Okay, anything else from planning?
no, that is it.
Can I prompt you to maybe give a quick summary of the VMT action taken? Because vehicle miles traveled is kind of, from an environmental perspective, it's an interesting topic, and that was addressed on September 5.
Yeah. So the VMT, or vehicle miles traveled, the city is working with a consultant on doing that work. There was a presentation to City Council on September 5th to get some initial feedback on what kind of metric levels those were going to be that Sebastopol wanted to use. So they look at, countywide averages or the greater Bay Area average and stuff like that. And the council gave, I believe, direction on which metrics they wanted to see. And the consultant is working on putting those together into a draft form, which will be coming back to both our planning commission and city council. I'm not sure on the timeline on that yet. I would imagine it's probably a couple months or so. But yeah, so that's just how we look at vehicle miles traveled for projects that trigger some sort of CEQA review, California Environmental Quality Act. It used to be level of service, and since the change has moved over to VMT instead. So the metrics are a little bit different. It kind of is a little outside of my full scope. So Carrie has, the better knowledge in that. But if you have any questions, I'd be happy to, if I can't answer it, get it on to Carrie to provide those.
Okay, so I'm going to chime in because he's taking the high level view and I have the what the heck is this all about view. So my understanding, the most interesting thing that I took away from this discussion was that for projects in Sebastopol, there would be a VMT standard, and it would apply differently to business versus residential projects. And as an example, the recommendation, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think it was 17.5 VMT for residential projects in Sebastopol. And so I have been tracking my miles driven in order to determine, do I drive more or less than 17.5 miles every day? Because apparently that's the standard. And there's a computer program. And then I think it's less. It was at 15 miles for, do you remember, John, for the commercial projects? No,
Yes.
It was higher. It was higher. It was the
It should be, yeah, I believe it's higher for commercial.
Yeah. It was the
And-
High Bay Area standard. I think it was like 20.
20,
Yeah.
it's 21 or 22, I think.
And
is
apparently
roughly
there
that.
is a computer program that a developer if interested in finding out whether that developer's project located where it is going to meet the vehicle miles traveled standard for either residential or for commercial. And the idea is to track from a location what are the vehicle miles traveled that a person living in the house would take in order to go to the grocery store, do their regular routine, versus if it's an office or commercial, what would it be for their regular routine if they were going to work? So it was just an interesting standard that was driven by the need to reduce the number of car miles on the road. So, and how the computer program does it, I have no idea. But ultimately, I thought that was really for all of us, okay, are you driving more or fewer than 17.5 vehicle miles per day? So my standard is lower. So that was my takeaway.
Yeah, so vehicle mile travels has two aspects. One is what you mentioned, an impact on a new project, and can we approve that project as is, or do we need to make some changes? And there's also vehicle mile travel as a general goal for the community to reduce vehicle mile travel. So this committee has a working group on metrics, and I'm a bit kind of nonplussed, that this working group has not been involved or didn't know about this, that hears about this here. So I wonder how we can use the intelligence of these people in these working groups more to support city effort.
Well, I'd like to address that. I think that's part of the point of the meeting we want to have next week. That's more of a kind of pullback and not next month, the more retreat meeting of, really like how are we integrating, how have we been successful or not successful in positioning ourselves the way we want to in relationship to the city staff, and how can we best serve. So I think if we can table that for next.
No, I'm just,
Yeah.
it's a comment here. It's not that you have to decide everything here, right? It's a comment.
All right. Thank you, planning. City count. Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Steve.
Just a quick question to staff. Are we at a point now that we can disseminate the results for the electrification survey to the 225 odd people that said, yes, I want to get the results? So we're good to go.
Yes.
Okay. And just follow up with Zeno on the VMT stuff. We did meet for about an hour with the RCPA staff people all about VMT. So if you want to know more, it's extremely arcane stuff. And I don't know how helpful it is for us to determine how well we're doing, because it's really project-based. It's a modeling tool, not a measuring. Like, we don't really know how much people drive. If you dig into the modeling tool, there's a lot of old data from 2017 and earlier that is pre-COVID. So we shouldn't look at it as necessarily guiding our decisions. Have we done a good job in reducing what people are driving or not? Thanks.
Yeah. And just so I believe that part of the update with this VMT thing is to look at updating that data that they have been using in the past to make sure it's, post-COVID and capturing, the fact that a lot of people didn't drive during that time frame and stuff like that. So the model has definitely changed over the last 5 to 6 years. So updating that data to reflect what's currently happening.
So is the consultant work on this? That's in the city document, or where can I find the name?
Yes, it's I can send it to you. It's also, the presentation was given at the September 5th City Council meeting. So the agenda item is on the city's website for that document.
Okay, thank you.
Huh?
All right. Diana, do you have anything else from council report?
Sure. An update really briefly, but it might be of interest to this group. The mobile home ordinance was considered at the September 5 City Council meeting. It's a rent control ordinance that applies to Fircrest Mobile Home and to our Park Village mobile home that's managed by West County Community Services. The upshot was that there will be a change in that ordinance, and the annual increase will now be allowed to be 75% of the CPI or 3% increase, whichever is lower. In addition, there was allowed and approved a 10% increase when a spot is vacated. So there's an opportunity for an increase for the owners. The owners were present. It's a family, the Mueller family, and we'll see how it is received and implemented. But there was a lot of community engagement, a lot of comments, a lot of input. That's where we are. We compare to other communities in the following ways. Most communities in Sonoma County that have changed their ordinances, have put a 4% cap on it. We put a 3% cap. And then other communities, in terms of the percentage of the CPI, have done anywhere from 70 to 75%. In terms of the move-out percentage allowed, anywhere from 10% to 15%. Notably for me, because I did try to pry the information out of them, although the owners did not, although they objected to the outcome as not allowing them an acceptable, reasonable profit, they did not, in fact, share any information about what that profit might currently be. Expenditures, revenue, or any of those factors that might have supported a different outcome, which we all understand from a profit margin perspective, but it's not understandable if you want a different result from me personally. It's my opinion. So that's really the only other item on the City Council agenda that I would report on at the moment. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much. So we will move on to our regular agenda. Item A, our October kind of retreat meeting. Staff has confirmed that we can meet like without all the accoutrement, as long as we're in a publicly available place within city limits. We could make our meeting a little bit longer. We do have to make the meeting open to members of the public, but we do not have to have it on Zoom. And it can be just a more relaxed atmosphere, which is not recorded. So I think Joshua and I are in alignment on wanting to move our next meeting to that setting, so that we can just kind of do a more informal brainstorm of where have we come, how far have we come, where do we want to go from here, and how can we support each other and our community in sustaining and accelerating this work. So we'll need to confirm a location, and we unfortunately do not have anything set down today, but if that's acceptable to everyone, we'd just like to move that forward unless somebody has objections, and love to hear how you feel about having the meeting go like an extra half hour, which is really all that staff can accommodate, but might just give us a little extra breathing room to think.
Well, I think it's a great idea. I'd like to see like a clear deliverable that we expect before we start. So some kind of agenda that leads to a deliverable.
Do you have a suggestion or idea of what you think that should look like?
Well, I mean, we mentioned already that we're still struggling communicating with the city and integrating the work of this with the planning commission, with the design review board, with the planning department, with the engineering department. So maybe we can look at how the city is organized and where the entry points are to give our expertise to the different things that happen in the city.
This is just making me wonder, like, would it make sense to have a portion of the meeting where we ask a few key city staff members to come, talk with us about how they'd like us to be working? Any thoughts?
You said it one time.
Yeah. Just like, would we want to invite some of the key city staff members, like department heads, to come talk to us during that meeting and maybe sit with us for a portion of the meeting of saying, like, we're here. How have we been serving you or not serving you? How could we serve you? Is that something we would want to be part of that meeting? Is that something we might consider for the future? Is that not something that's not important to us? I hadn't thought about this before, so it's just a kind of fresh idea, but yeah, go ahead.
Here. So my feeling is there's just so much to keep up on all the time. It's just things are moving so fast. I think sometimes, at least for me, I can miss things because, I'm just not spending every moment of my day keeping up on everything. So I think the question is, how can we be the most valuable and serve those people? And I think that's a great question to ask. I think the same check. I think the same question is with Carrie. And so if there's ways that we can improve or work better together with her, because she has obviously a lot of balls in the air, and especially around the climate piece. So that'd be great to have her there and maybe other folks as well.
Yes, Joshua, weigh in. I know you have lots of good ideas for this kind of meeting.
I guess I would say that my concerns or my questions with respect to the idea of a committee retreat is a little bit more about sustaining our internal process and kind of evaluating that. And like we've sort of had our first year with a work plan and with a different meeting structure, and kind of reevaluating the working groups and process and schedule and understanding that this January, a few people's terms may time out and there may be a rotation. And so for me, it's less about a deliverable. I'm not sure what that would be. Is that a document or a result? I mean, if we're talking to each other, we're not going to create something that day. I'm a little more interested in a mutual understanding about our strategy going forward, and that we're coordinated as a group with kind of how we communicate with each other and how we approach interacting with the city. And I'm certainly interested in hearing from the city, but I wouldn't want that to take up a large percentage of the meeting. If it could be, sort of quick snippets or something that was condensed, or even kind of, summary documents or something like that, that would be great. But for me, I'm most interested in kind of our internal strategy and just making sure, talking to everybody, like what's working, what's not working so well, how do we steer and adjust, knowing what we know now and looking ahead. So just that.
I concur. I'll also say that maybe we could utilize the November meeting to do what we were talking about with staff. Maybe we spend the October with internal and November with more like staff input as we like bring a plan. Hey, this is what we're thinking about doing this year. How could we work together?
Council member and planning staff, does that seem like something that other city staff might be interested or willing, to do, is to kind of come in to our November meeting and talk with us? Or an alternate structure could be like those of us who have, like, I know Joshua talks to Dante, like individual working groups have contact with different departments, and we could do maybe key informant interviews with prior to our October meeting of, hey, we're going to be doing this retreat. Do you want to give us any input in like how we could be better working with your department ahead of the October meeting? So I'm just thinking out loud here. So
I'm just going to jump in here. I much prefer being on the city council. I know we're all aware of this. I am very protective of city staff time. And they're a great resource and they're important to the Climate Action Committee. But I love the idea of not calling them to a meeting, but instead using staff as a resource. This idea that you just proposed, Kenna, of having various members of this committee interview, check in with, and then report back at the October meeting sounds like a great alternative to me. However, I almost feel like it might be better to have the purity of the October meeting that's just a discussion of what this group sees as the internal process, kind of like what we were hearing from Joshua, with the plan to then, afterwards perhaps, after those have been gelled and we've figured out what the cohesive internal plan is that works for this committee, then there's going to be some questions that perhaps this committee could go out and request answers of staff members. But I much prefer the process where, and I think you're going to find that the relationship with staff will be better served by approaching them when there's some specific information that needs to be gathered for the group to then consider. But just my thoughts. But John Jay, you may have some input too.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's definitely a lot easier to, if you guys have a specific list of items that we can say like, hey, yeah, we would need help on this, or no, we can take care of this, or whatever that form is. I think just kind of saying, hey, what do you need help with? We'd probably give you way too much than what you can handle. So I think having some sort of plan to ask as far as what types of things that best align the group also, so that we can look into it a little bit deeper and say these few things we're having trouble getting stuff, and it would be helpful to have an extra set of hands to do that. So I appreciate Diana's words there that we are here to help, but our time is spread pretty thin on some departments and stuff like that. So having kind of a narrowed kind of focus would definitely help, I think.
Yeah.
It seems we're already discussing. These things would come up at a retreat meeting, right? Rather than now say, oh, let's all get the staff to get involved, and let's something different. That's something we want to discuss at the retreat, rather than already now kind of keep pressing people.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a kind of different side of what Joshua was saying. Go to the October retreat and figure out what this group wants to do, really work through that process, and then figure out how staff fits within it. I think that's what you're both saying, and use them as a resource. But yeah, clearly this is a group of citizen volunteers trying to do good works. So don't get me wrong, you should be relying on staff for the information. That definitely needs to happen. But yeah, that retreat will help you figure out how you want to integrate staff support. So think we're all saying the same thing.
Yeah, and just acknowledging that across this whole country and the state of California, there's a massive deficit and difficulties with recruiting and retaining civil service employees. Just respecting their time and giving them a little padding might not be a bad idea.
Hey, I have kind of a general question, and I don't know that this is workable, but has this group had, I'm wondering whether at some point, and maybe this could be considered at the October retreat, whether it might be worthwhile to schedule speakers at these meetings. So have like Dante Del Prete come for one of the meetings to just, do a presentation. You could define the presentation. Same thing with other department heads. Just, on a quank, just a thought there. Maybe that's one way to integrate them in a planned way. But
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead.
Love that idea.
All right. So, were you wanting to say something, Phil?
Not to be ultra redundant or anything, but I was thinking to agree with everybody and then use October to plan for the year in advance. And that way we bundle all of our needs for the year going forward. So we have a way to plan and approach how staff, allocates its time for us. And then they already know in advance what we're going to be able to do. So we don't seem to duplicate efforts.
Perfect. All right. I think we're close to a consensus, and I have not heard any loud objections to extending the time by half an hour next month. So I think we will plan on extending the time by a half hour, starting at the same time, extending the time. I don't know if you have to leave to do. Yes. So we can make sure that we can front load Dina's input. And we will send out an announcement of the location and with the agenda at the latest, if not sooner. And then in terms of securing the location, is that something that we need to do, or do you need to make that request?
I think we can work together on that.
Okay.
If you guys have a general location on where you want to meet, we can start there.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
Just to clarify one point about the location, does it have to be within city limits? So for
Yes.
instance, that rules out Regal Park because it's just over the line, and similarly it rules out Dina's place because it's just over the line.
Yeah.
So we might be limited to something like Ives, which would be weather dependent then, I guess. So
Yeah, if we're outdoors, it's going to be weather and smoke dependent.
okay.
do we have any locations in mind? Has anyone proposed locations?
Well, indoor locations that are probably available to us, like if they're not booked, would be the green room or the library or the Center for the Arts. On outdoor locations, which tend to be more pleasant, would be Ives or I guess the park here. I don't know. Any brilliant ideas? Throw them forward or email them to Joshua and I.
All right. Yeah, the only thing that came to mind, and I don't know if he'd be willing, would be the co-work space. Oh, how about the empty CVS space? Apparently it's safe enough for the spirit of Halloween to take over. So, just saying. Sorry, a little snarky. I'll take that back.
That's okay. Oh yeah, the co-work space. Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, they might like to have people in there. Okay. Thank you. All ideas, send them over, and Joshua and I will start planning right away. I'm looking at him. He's not looking at me. All right. So moving on to electrification. Steve, take it away. My understanding of where we're at is really just we've heard the survey results. Those are now posted, and that the action item would be moving and a kind of official, yes, please take this to city council.
Can you enable screen sharing, please? Finding the right screen to share is always a struggle. Okay, so the idea here is beyond just sending out the results to Sonoma Clean Power and RCPA and what other organizations. We want to get into what kind of next steps. So what we tried to do here is do a rough prioritization of what we see as kind of next steps. And Lisa and I went to an event just last week put on by Cool Petaluma, and they did what we were actually very interested in doing. They assembled electrification contractors from Petaluma, and a lot of them are from this area too. And they got them together and find out what kind of barriers they have that they're facing. And it was a very interesting event. So we see Cool Petaluma as being one of the main collaborators to work on just what we're working. We gave them the results of the electrification survey. They were thinking about doing their own. Well, they don't really need to do that now because they have the results of our survey. So Cool Petaluma, in combination with the Building Decarbonization Coalition, which is also out of Petaluma, they work more on state and even national decarbonization efforts. They are also a very good local collaborator. So we haven't decided if we're going to end up repeating a similar event around here for electrification contractors. I can give you a little bit of the information that we got from the meeting. What are the biggest barriers that they're facing? And workforce is number one. They can't find trained workers. The only training that's really available is out in Contra Costa County. And there are programs that try to get high school students to be mentored by employers in the field to get them interested, but that's kind of a longer term prospect. So that's a really hard nut to crack. In my opinion, the junior college has kind of fallen down on that. It was a great opportunity. They had interest in doing both photovoltaics and HVAC training, and no money. So maybe this is an opportunity where other people or organizations like Sonoma Clean Power, if we could convince them that this is a really big barrier for us in this area to help our businesses and ultimately help the consumers. So the other big barrier, which was a bit of a surprise to us, was around permitting issues. Petaluma just went through a transition from in-person, over-the-desk permits to online. And in the process, vastly complicated it to the point where it was like 10 pages of things they had to fill out for what was simple. Just go in there. If I have questions, I can talk to somebody across the desk. Well, Sebastopol is just now also automating their permit process. So that's something that we need to look out for. I don't know enough about it to say that we have those same kind of issues, but there are other things that they're looking at in terms of permits that could help out. During COVID, you could get an inspection remotely. You'd be there with your cell phone and show the equipment that was installed, what you did, and the contractors love that because what they kills them is showing up at a place and you're paying for your tech to be there, so that drives up the permit costs. And then the building inspector is late or doesn't show, so now you have to reschedule. So if there's a way that we can get that kind of remote, bring it back. So those are just a couple of ideas on the big barrier. So moving on. So the first step is collaboration, because there's definitely people out there working on the same thing as what we're working on. And we need to hook up with them and see what we can do to promote each other's efforts and learn. So then the next is working with the Sonoma County Climate Action and Resiliency Division. They are pretty much our go-to public agency for help with electrification. At least that's what we've found, having visited Sonoma Clean Power's Advanced Energy Center and having talked with a lot of the contractors and other people who have gone through electrification. They are the most up to date on what the incentives are. They actually consult with people on their individual building issues, help find contractors, and help them through basically the whole process of electrification. So our intention is to meet with them to find out, once again, what can we do to collaborate more and promote their efforts. And in addition to that, we see meeting with Sonoma Clean Power and the RCPA reps and talk to them about, this is the strategy that we see as having the most leverage in terms of government resources, and promoting the idea that Sonoma Clean Power or the RCPA can help that county's division instead of trying to repeat services with some different program. So ultimately, we see contractors as the key. They're the ones out there selling. They're the ones who are not selling, not mentioning heat pumps. And that's a real issue. You know, a lot of people don't know about them. Contractors aren't familiar with them. There are lots of barriers in terms of getting contractors on board. There's an increasing interest in it, though. They are signing up for this stuff, and they want to know, they see the writing on the wall that in a few years down the road, you're not going to be able to install gas equipment. So they need to get up to speed. And it could be that we decide to organize an event similar to what Cool Petaluma did and get more contractors that are a little further north. We're yet to see if that's what we're going to decide. It really takes some meeting with the Cool Petaluma folks to determine if that is a good, indeed, next step. So where we had some divergence of opinion amongst ourselves is, well, okay, that's all fine and good. What about getting the word out to people? And I was on the side of that we need to kind of approach it more like a marketing campaign, because there's a lot of people out there that think of electrification and think about the old style, that before heat pumps, when it would cost you quite a bit more if you were going to heat your house with electricity than with gas. So that's not the case anymore. And a marketing campaign that pushes electrification is what we're interested in. That's certainly a lower priority, because we do see the contractors are the key to selling and making this change. It's the kind of thing that once got the contractors going, we want to make sure there's demand out there, that people are starting to ask the contractors, even if they're not part of these programs, they know enough to say, hey, I'm interested in a heat pump. I hear it can save me some money and I want to get off of gas. So that's less defined, this whole marketing approach. And I have a question for city staff. For most all of these incentive programs, number one, you need a permit. Number two, the contractor you hire has to be on a list. And there are different lists for different programs. The programs change quite a bit. And I want to know, can the city publicize a list of contractors? So we promote the list of contractors that are meeting the criteria for people to take advantage of the incentives. Maybe you can, Joshua, go ahead.
Just a little question, Steve, and if this is too much of an aside, we don't need to delve into it, but I read a little while ago that a certain significant portion of the state rebates and subsidies are not really coming online until next year. and that's been a bit of delay in some cases. And so I wonder if there might be some timing issues about kind of getting the other ducks in a row to be primed to start funneling people into that process for next year.
Yeah, there is definitely a timing issue, especially with the federal incentives, the Inflation Reduction Act. Some of those really don't kick in until the first of the year, we hope. But there are some other incentives starting this month where it's like $4,000 for a heat pump water heater. You know, big incentives. The state is basically of the position that we want to replace all the water heaters in the state that are gas to heat pumps. And you know, they last like 17 years. So there's this transition period that we're going to have. And as the requirements increase, but there are some big incentives that are available now. So this will take a while for us to kind of push and promote which incentives. So this is our basic approach in terms of next steps. Collaborate, meet with the what we identify as the key groups or individuals, and then promote to contractors, find out more about what their barriers are, what can we do to lessen their barriers. Like the city of St. Helena had a 7-month, 75% reduction in permit fees. And we've talked about that a little bit. Permit fees are not super high for most of these things. So I don't think they see it, and we don't see it as necessarily a big driver. It might be more this issue about how can we make the inspection process easier through video. So that's basically where we stand now.
I feel like what you're describing and proposing is very relevant and appropriate and very much in line with where CEC is going. So, you know, in alignment with state groups. And I know CEC is trying to develop a website to try to do this exact, like, make it easier for people to figure out these incentives. And they have a whole section for contractors that even goes down into like, how can I add this electric stuff to homes without upgrading the electric panel? You know, like, so I think it's all coming together. And this is an appropriate local level, you know, lane for us to move forward.
So if I'm remembering right, there's kind of this open question as to whether basically Steve gets to go to the October 3rd city council meeting. And as I understand it, would sort of say to them kind of very similar to what you've said to us in terms of a summary of the survey results and recommended next steps. That being the case, I feel that Steve and his cohort and the Energy Working Group have done an excellent job on this and deserve our trust. And rather than delaying it further, if it's expedient to encourage them to get into the October 3rd meeting, I so move, I guess.
Does anyone second the motion? Okay. And discussion?
Yeah, so what I'm missing is the political level. It's like working with other organizations, publicity with the public, but I like the fundraising level, the political level. I think something like AmeriCorps for electrification of Sonoma County, working with the county to really design something that works at speed and scale. Because each of these ideas that we have are very influential. And they are not enough, I think, given that we have an emergency declaration in the city, that the news online, in the newspaper, is alarming in many ways. So I feel that there needs to be an extra effort to create political alliances with the board of supervisors, with the other city, to create a youth task force to support the electrification program, rather than working with this agency that's already doing it informing the public that they can rebate. It's good, but I don't think enough.
I feel like that's in the lane of the building collaborations. And I mean, I don't know if that was part, if you feel like this building a larger political coalition is part of that seeking collaborations.
Yes, definitely. I think it's part of it, but like Zeno says, it's inadequate. But given the resources that we have as our small group, the only way we can really make headway is with that collaboration, that then we try to build momentum for putting pressure on larger change.
I mean, I would suggest that in terms of an accessible low-hanging fruit, advocating for the city to have a bit of an electrification page where rebates and approved contractors are just mentioned would be an excellent step and is achievable.
I had a suggestion on a couple of other groups that it might be worth collaborating with. First of all, there's North Coast Builders Exchange, because they are the trade group for a lot of contractors, not all of them. There are a lot of smaller ones that don't participate in that group, but still, there are a lot of big ones there. And then the other group is North Bay Conservation Corps. And they actually are opening up a Santa Rosa school. They've bought a new building, and they provide training. So it's trades training for generally at-risk youth. So, that's an area, if we're looking at trying to figure out how to facilitate more training, that might be a good connection that would round out the various interest groups. So that would be my suggestion if we want to actually pursue this collaborative approach in a larger sense. And then my general comment about what's going to the city council is I don't see any action items in this list that Steve has described for the city council. This sounds like, which is not necessarily bad, but it sounds like it's an opportunity for the city council to learn more about the study and next steps and ask questions. Was that the intent? Did I get that correctly? Is that what we're asking of the city council? Report out.
Steve, is there any ask of city council?
Other than the actual report out, I think we can safely say we're one of the few cities across the country that has initiated an effort like this. So if it just ends up as a shelf document, that's not all that useful. If it just ends up with Sebastopol making some slight modifications to things, that's not that useful. So we're trying to find where can we work with other cities to get on the same page of where should we push in electrification to address the barriers that are out there. So I get that there's not a long list of specifics for the city of Sebastopol. We're trying to look a bit beyond the city of Sebastopol.
Got it. Then the other comment I have is that if you haven't yet, it might be interesting, Steve, to have a discussion with our building official, Steve Brown, because he's a contact for a lot of the building inspections, and you might get some information from him that would help in terms of next steps on electrification.
Thanks.
But thank you for that answer.
Yeah, good idea.
Any further discussion before we vote on the motion before us? I would love if we can add just a little framing on either side of the electrification. That is just a small, climate and all policies request to council that, we're saying just to keep the larger work of the committee and the larger goals of the committee and the larger, not the goals of the committee, the goals of the city that they set when they declared the emergency and created the committee. So just to frame this presentation within that context and present it in that way as part of that larger context.
Very good.
Can I make one final suggestion? Since if this is being presented to the city council, I heard mention the possibility of convening an event similar to the I think it was Cool Petaluma event that brought together contractors. I would recommend that potential event at least be mentioned to the city council in the next report in order to provide an opportunity to maybe bring it up as a more concrete action item to the city council. So at least you've put the seed out there.
Go ahead, Joshua.
In a similar vein, just the website thing, I think it would help if there was a little bit more. You suggested a list of approved contractors and have a sense of rebates and that sort of stuff, and just having a nexus for that information that could be shared would be great.
I guess I'd want to know, is that something that, I know that's kind of, the city has not done anything like that in the past?
So I'll have to double check as far as the list of the approved contractors. I know we can't like solicitate certain groups and leave out others, but if there's a way that, if there's like a website or a link that forwards them to how they can search for approved contractors that are capable of doing that work, I think that's something that we can probably definitely put on the website as a recommendation. But I don't think we can, give specific contractor names and organizations.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, but I can double check into that, and I just don't want it to, because we can't specify use this contractor rather than this one. So.
And that also puts the city in the position of having to verify that these people are retaining their credential to do the work.
True.
So
I think Bayren has the list of verified contractors, so we could direct them there, even though it's one step.
Yeah, there are multiple lists now as the programs shuffle around. Yeah, thanks.
all right. And I did hear from one contractor that lives inside city limits that he's looking to become a Bayren contractor. So one more on the
Yeah,
way.
that's actually what would probably be direct meetings with local contractors who do quite a bit of work that aren't on any of these lists. And we need to show them the benefits. And part of the benefits is the city actually listing their name. I got to say that's one of the few things the city can do in terms of promoting the contractors who are out there on the front lines.
Great. So motion on the table is that we, as a committee, give our blessing to the electrification working group to take their survey results and draft list of prioritized options for electrification next steps and create a presentation for city council to be presented on October 3rd. All in favor?
Whoever seconded that are they okay
And
with that
yeah.
amendment?
Oh,
Okay.
Did I amend it?
A little bit. Yeah. Okay. Well, since we're recording this, we'll do a count. Sonali?
Yes.
Ambrosia? Kenna?
Yes.
Zeno?
Yeah.
Alex,
Alex, geez. Joshua? Emmett?
Yes.
Dina?
Yes.
And Diana?
Yes.
All right. So that motion passes, and I believe we have a couple absent folks today.
Great. Thank you, Steve. All right. And now we're going to move to the transportation survey, which I believe you all got in your packet. And is that Zeno or Emmett?
Can we delete the
Or
screen
is
share?
that Phil?
Yeah.
Where'd Phil go?
Phil had to leave.
Oh, no.
I think he expected that this would come up earlier. If there are any particular questions between Emmett and I, we probably could address them, but he was going to do the presentation. So the proposal is here. We created a survey. And there's a cover letter that explains the reason for doing the survey and the precaution that we went in putting it all together. And we talked to the motion that we propose is to give the Transportation Committee the go-ahead to implement having the survey.
All right. Go ahead.
I did scan through the survey that was with the agenda packet, and I'm sorry if I missed this bit of information. I'm being repetitive, but what I was wondering about is how does the information you would get from this survey give input to the active transportation plan in their time frame, or are you planning to interact with that? Like, this is what we found out about our community, and present it and be a part of changing the active transportation plan that is being presented at the Planning Commission this evening?
Yeah, so just like with the electrification survey, it didn't come with a list of potential consequences. These consequences were designed after the survey was analyzed. In our case, we haven't connected that explicitly with the transportation update, active transportation. But it will give a lot of information about where people are, what are the stress points in town. So it is natural that one of the actions would be to distill ideas out of this survey that could be inputted in the process. Right?
Then the timing is super important, right? Because SCTA and the consultants have their timeline, and then to get your survey out and analyzed and everything with enough time to give them that input, it's all in the timing, isn't it?
Right, and they move a bit slow, so I don't see a problem.
Okay. Thanks for answering that.
Mike, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, in general, yes, the survey should happen. Great thing. I have a couple of concerns, just a little bit about the opening paragraphs there. I think there's a couple ways in which it maybe overstates the case. For instance, this bit, your answers will guide decision makers creating a more bike and walk friendly Sebastopol. I'm not sure that that's actually true. I mean, there's various people who do and don't make decisions who are not necessarily creating that yet, but are trying to encourage the development of something like that. So I think it's maybe a little bit ambitious to say there are decision makers creating this and they will listen to what you say in this survey, maybe overstating the case a little bit. And then I might be off base in this one, in that I'm sure a lot of people who bike in particular are concerned about climate impacts and all of that. But I think leading with saying transportation is 60% of its emissions and not necessarily expanding that is not necessarily the first angle to sell that idea of active transportation. In particular, with active transportation, it's a lot about getting more and more people on board who don't necessarily care about those climate issues. That's not going to be the main motivating factor. It's convenience. It's making it safe. So there's all these other benefits that are also mentioned there. Foster vibrant communities, improve public health, all these sorts of things. I think all of that is great. I just think it might be a little bit of a mistake to lead with, this is all about reducing emissions, because frankly, only some folks are tuned in to care about that, and you don't want to lose the folks who are not concerned about that but might be convinced to bike. As a little bit of a backup to this, in urban design grad school, I went to Copenhagen and Malmö, where they had retrofitted their entire bike commuter system. And it was not about getting the ecological activists. It was about getting the grandpas and the business people and the kids who were just about a safe route to school. And so that safe route to school was a huge thing. And they got to the point where they had, more than half of their downtown commuters coming in on bike because they made it easy and safe, not because they galvanized the climate activism angle. So just saying a little bit of care about the messaging. I wouldn't, make it too specific to let's save the climate by biking and walking. How about let's increase our health in our community and have a good time by biking and walking. Oh, and guess what? It's also great for the climate. So it's just a little suggestion about the emphasis.
Yeah, it's a challenge, right? Because we are a climate committee. And so maybe this remark is mostly directed to you as the defender of our emergency plan for the climate rather than the public. But you make a good point, I think. So in this summary up, climate is important for the people who are active in the working group because they're there for climate, right?
This survey is not for me, right? So
No, I see, but downplaying the angle with climate may be strategic, and I will relate this to Phil and see what he thinks about it. On the other hand, it's a climate committee, right? And it's a transportation group that deals with climate impacts of transportation. So you cannot really hide it too much. You have to kind of put it somewhere. But I will relate to him to maybe hide it a bit, right? And put safe route to school and
I'm not saying hide it. I'm just suggesting that leading with it is maybe
that's
maybe
what
not
I
the
mean,
best
like
angle.
hiding in the sense of putting it second or third.
So can I comment on this topic? Yeah, so this survey is coming from the Climate Action Committee. It's not coming from a subgroup. And I agree with Joshua's comments. I think that, that the lead-in paragraph does convey much too much authority and power from the results of this survey. So as a city council member, I find that troubling. And thank you, Joshua, for bringing that comment forward. The other piece is this is a survey. It's not an advocacy effort. It's as I understand it, it's an effort to gather information in a way that allows everyone who answers this survey to feel honest and forthright about how they answer it. So I think it's important for it to be reassessed from that perspective. It's gathering information, not advocating. I did have, in terms of specific comments on this survey, I do think that there are a couple of questions that could be rejiggered a little bit. Number 5 and number 6, for me, were a little confusing, just the way the answers were phrased. Would owning an electric bicycle change how often you use active transportation? And the options were not much, maybe 5 times a year, yes, several times a month. Something that's a little more, what does that mean? I mean, I think what you were saying is my use would increase by five times a year, whatever, something that shows what the answer is. Yes, I would use this transportation several times a month. So that's a couple of suggestions on clarity. And on numbers, the other item is, I know this is about walking and biking, and I note in number 7, you ask whether, the survey asks, have you ever bicycled on the green bike lanes on Sebastopol roads? Are we asking any questions about, well, number 1, I'd ask, do people know what the green bike lanes are? And number 2, I'd ask, how are we asking questions about bicycling or walking specifically on the bike paths, the Joe Rodota Trail? I noticed that you ask, the survey asks whether people are aware of it, but maybe you can help me, Zeno, embedded in those questions about the bike trails, is there a question about how frequently? You say, are you aware of the Joe Rodota Trail? Frequently used. So to the extent that you want to know how frequently people use those trails, then maybe you need to put that in there too. 5 times monthly, whatever it is. Finally, I'm going to call attention to a particular survey question that I have to oppose strongly, and that is number 10. So this is one that's advocating, and I call it out because it clearly is advocating, and it is representing a generalized opinion from those who are distributing this survey that I don't think it's necessarily fair to assume. So this says local group Sebastopol Trailmakers designed 2 potential off-street trails in 2014, the Apple Blossom Trail and Gravenstein Trail. Both of these trails have attractive qualities and are worthy of addition to the new ATP. I personally am not willing to accept that as a generalized statement. It certainly doesn't represent my personal opinion, and I think there is a lot of controversy about these particular trails. And if you talk to many, many people in town, they're aware of a lot of history there. So that would be one that I'd call out. There is no authority, I think, that has made a decision that those 2 trails should be added in, despite my incredible respect for Lynn Diedler and many, many hours of conversation that I've had with him about these trails. So
Diana,
that's one.
do you object to that? The third and fourth sentences of that question, or do you object to the whole question?
Let's see, if we delete, both of these trails have attractive qualities. Addition of off-street trails will help to have no objection to the final sentence. I have to ask why we're including the website link. That seems an advocacy position to be taking. I certainly would have no trouble to having it read, a local group has designed 2 potential off-street trails in 2014. Go ahead and identify them, Apple Blossom Trail and another coined the Gravenstein Trail. Addition of off-street trails where possible will help shape Sebastopol into a bike-friendly community. But then you get into the check all that apply. I haven't looked carefully at those answers, but I think that needs to be reassessed from a perspective of neutrality. And I'm not in a position right here in the moment to redraft all of that. And others in this committee, you know, this is a committee not of one, it's a committee of many, many people, may have a different perspective on that.
Yeah, I agree that advocacy, we have to be very careful. I do think that surveys, which is part of what Josh was calling out, they are a public education tool. So it's not wrong to include education. I think our electrification survey was really well crafted as both an effective survey and a public education tool. So I think it's good to just watch that line. And I appreciate the call out of where this crosses over into advocacy. And Joshua's comments about, because obviously a lot of great work went into crafting this survey and there's a lot of good stuff here, but really looking at effective communication techniques, because we do come from our lane, like we're talking about transportation from a climate perspective, and it's hard to remember to pull out and be like, okay, this is also a public education tool. At the same time that we're trying to not lead people to the answers we want. We just want them to say what's really true for them. My question for this,
Yeah, I mean, I see your point, and we I think we could remove that question. We could also like reformulate that question, saying Trailblazers has opinionated, and then we explain what they think. What do you think about this proposal? Do you agree? Do you want it? Which one would you like? Things like that. So you pack it more as a little piece of information about a citizen group in town who had developed ideas about trail and kind of try to gauge what is the current citizens' kind of opinion about that.
Yeah,
so that would kind of evade the idea that the survey is advocating anything.
Yeah.
And it would give valuable information about these trails that are very popular among bikers in Sebastopol. So it's not, I mean, I know there's a whole history to this, but it's not something that is completely fringe, right? There's a group of people that like this, and it would be good to hear in the survey what support this has outside the activists.
Alex, I'm going to finish what I was going to say, and then I'll have you talk. I don't want to spend a lot more time on this because I think that the upshot here is that the committee is sending back for edits with a lot of suggestions given. And my suggestion is that we add some demographic data so that we can disaggregate like who's saying what is the age of the person doing the survey, or what age category, and what part of town do they live in, how close to downtown. Like I'm not sure what all the things we want to look at. I don't have a lot of history in transportation planning. So, but it does feel like there would be, just as we did with the electrification survey, owner versus renter seemed very relevant, inside, outside city limits, those kind of questions. So I think coming back with some, taking the comments of the group and adding a proposed demographic section, that's where I think we're going. Alex, did you want to add something?
No, I was just gonna make it clear what the recommendations were. It sounds like question 5 and 6, there need the answer, the way that the answer or the questions are set up to answer them maybe need recommended to be adjusted a little bit. And then question 10, we're gonna reword to look at being more objective, I guess is the best way I could say it. And then adding demographic data. I just wanted to capture that so we could send it to Phil in the group.
Perfect. And hopefully Phil will listen to this, and thank you, Phil.
And I think the additional change was in the introductory language. Was that what you were saying, Josh?
Yeah. All right. Thank you guys so much. And Steve, I hope you guys would be willing to serve in a consultancy role as they're doing their edits.
Yeah, Phil did reach out and I gave some early feedback. Thanks. I just wanted to make a suggestion on number 10. Maybe it's appropriate to gauge awareness of these 2 trail options, and in addition or possibly instead of, do you support these trail? Because I think most people have no clue what you're talking about.
All right, great. So we're going to move on to the rest of our agenda, for which we have 13 minutes. Alex, I don't know if you want to do like 3 minutes on the engagement series.
I don't think it'll take 3 minutes. I think basically we're just trying to determine a way to get another engagement series event before the end of the year. I think it'll depend on what topics will be covered and how we structure that. I wish Dina was here, but I think the hard part for me is trying to first getting some support and some, just to get the event accomplished, because it takes a lot of work. I think the first event, there was a lot of work that we can use for the next, but trying to differentiate it from like a carbon conversations where we're really educating from a presentation point of view and trying to make it more of a collaborative or engaging event. So I guess the question is there any ways we could tie this into anything else any of the other groups are doing before the end of the year? And I guess, are there any other ways to keep the community engaged? I mean, I think having breakout groups and discussing things was a good start and momentum, but I'm just not sure what else we could put in that context.
I'd just like to say that I personally would welcome discussion of that sort of subject at our retreat, because I think the topic of how we get the word out to the public and how we get more people engaged and galvanized is pressing and something that we should all contribute to the discussion of. And so I'd love to just try to flesh that question out more and get something tangible at our next meeting.
So would you kind of like the different working groups to be thinking about like how could a public engagement event dovetail with some of the other work that we're trying to do?
Exactly. And then, I mean, there's a possibility we could do this on a more regular basis next year, or like quarterly or something. And if every group could come with just one idea, it doesn't have to be the best idea, but for a way that we could educate, or a topic that we want to talk about that's maybe like, as we think about it, we become experts and we become like really focused on one thing. But I think we really want to think about our topics and, I don't want to say generalizing, but giving a better overview and maybe taking a little more of an elementary approach to what the engagement series would be, or just making sure we're not making it too academic, I guess is the best way I could say it. But anyway, I would just say, think about a topic that could work for an engagement series for each working group, and we'll talk in October.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah, so we did hear about and that's a non-profit organized kind of events that we're talking about. Petaluma also has worked with daily life, hiring them for this and that done or promote something. So I think that could be something that we could do in turn, because it takes a lot of effort to make it done for members of this community. And so if we could work with SOAR and its climate conversation, where each month on the only other meeting that is very relevant for our work, I think that could be a step forward. If we could intensify the connection between the community, the city, and climate conversation, and it's kind of hiring him or developing a relationship that we can look at this conversation as filling in the education outreach component of our work. Just like Petaluma, Food Petaluma, and I've worked with
Yeah, thank you. I think we will discuss more, but absolutely using the strengths that are in our community and to help us reach our goals. Do we have any working group reports for things that weren't on the agenda? Go ahead.
Yeah, so from the sequestration front, the last weekend's compost event was pretty successful, fairly mellow and smooth as they go. There's getting to be a feeling that this process is getting established. So that's kind of a nice. It was just me and Dina and Tor there, and when we got there at 8:15 or 8:20, there was already a mob of people trying to hit up the pile, and I had to like scold them a little bit and make people line up and all this kind of thing. Yeah, like no. But once we got a little bit of order in there, it was very smooth and happy and chugging right along. So far so good. There is of course another one happening on October 14th, the Saturday after our next meeting. However, on another vein of what we're working on these days with respect to the community garden site, we got a bunch of the compost. We got a bunch of bags dropped off at the community garden site. There is apparently a need to sort of rework the raised beds a fair amount. Like they need to be dug up and heavily amended and go for wire checked and that kind of thing. So we are organizing a volunteer work party day on October 8th, which is the Sunday just before our next committee meeting. And we're starting to put the word out through various avenues that we have. I will probably send an email reminding you all about that event a week or two ahead of time. Again, if you can help us get the word out or come by for a little bit or offer other suggestions for groups that we might reach, that would be great. The plan is just 10 to 1 that Dina and I and a couple of the gardeners will be on site. We'll see who shows up and get some things done for a few hours. Our sense at the moment, we had been talking about trying to move towards a public opening event for the garden, and so far still about half of the beds are not really being rented these days. So our sense is there isn't quite enough energy there at the site just yet to say, hey, we've arrived, everybody. So at this point we're looking towards a big public event. It's probably more like next spring. Meanwhile, we'll do a couple more of these kind of periodic targeted volunteer input ones. I am talking to the group at the high school about coming to that one, for instance. So that's just kind of the status of what we're working on that front. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Sequestration. Any other working groups that want to present any information today? Anything from Zero Waste?
Sure.
Yeah.
You want to report or shall I on our? Okay. Yes. So this is the Zero Waste Working Group. The update is that yes, the climate action superheroes articles are being pursued. This was the idea of putting together a written piece that recognized a zero waste superhero in the community and provided kind of some personal what you could do yourself at home to reflect the same success of the superhero. Judy Morgan, who is with Burbank Heights and Orchards and is on this working group, has already reached out to Laura Hager and is coordinating with her for an article in the Sebastopol Times. The subject, tentatively at the moment, is a woman at Burbank Heights and Orchards who is very well known to Ambrosia because of her amazing efforts to take that large community of people and organize, sort through, and ensure that all of their refuse goes into the right bins and the right locations. So that's the plan at the moment. There is no date, but we do expect an article to come out of that effort. And then the other piece was a follow-up, on the garden, community garden. Just wanted to comment that I have put Dina in touch with the individual at the Rotary Club, Noon Club, and also Sunrise Club Rotary, and Kiwanis and Lions that handles all of the volunteers. So hopefully you'll see some results from that. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you so much. This is great to have some energy and zero waste. And if I would suggest a zero waste superhero, would be the people working on getting the school board to adopt a preferred purchasing policy. So, yeah, zero waste activities going on all around us. Anybody else want to say anything about what they have been up to or want to be up to before October? Then we will move on to chair reports. I just had on there that this, the fossil fuels non-proliferation treaty that Woody had brought to us and asked us to move forward to council was now approved by the state of California, which is considered a huge win. And when we look at successful public health initiatives in the past, such as tobacco, behavior change is a lot harder to get when you haven't figured out that there's an industry driving a lot of misinformation and disinformation. So public announcements like this having moved all the way up to the state level are great in terms of making that momentum move forward faster, of really acknowledging that there's an industry that is actively working to suppress and oppress people. That's my opinion, not the opinion of the committee. Anything else from you, Joshua, in terms of chair reports? And any input from members regarding next meeting agenda other than what we've already discussed in terms of the retreat, or anything that you'd like to add to the November agenda at this time? Yeah.
I've become aware of the state law that is requiring utility billings to shift to a flat rate billing with an income-based reference point. And I haven't heard anything from this Climate Action Committee on that topic, but I did speak with Melinda, the woman who's our PG&E rep, and I am aware that there's a proposal from the various utilities that's being submitted to the utility, is it UPC, whatever, the utility company, the utility oversight group. And it's a fixed rate schedule, and it is income based. The CPUC is looking at it, and there might be a decision in 2024, and there might actually be rates implemented in 2025. The reason I felt this was important for this group is because there's real concern, for instance, from the Sierra Club, that by establishing flat rates, you're undermining the ability to create an incentive for people to be better about use of utilities. So from a policy perspective, it's troubling, and I don't know which group might be looking into this or whether it's of interest to this committee, but I think it has the potential for causing us some problems as we try to move forward with electrification. The proposal for PG&E, and I don't think it applies to Sonoma Clean Power, but it's the big guys. For PG&E, the fixed rate for the lowest one for 28,000 or less household income would be $15 a month. And then for the customer that's 180,000 or more for the household, it would be, looks like $92 a month, but it would be a flat rate. And that's a state law, is my understanding. Does anyone know anything about this? Because it was news to me.
Sorry, just clarifying, that's a bill that hasn't passed.
No. Oh, do you think not?
I'm
No,
I'm asking you.
No, it is a law. And and it is in the process of being implemented. It was signed by Governor Newsom. But I will send this out I'll send it through John Jay to the committee. And if I'm wrong about that, I would love to know that. But it looks like it's in the midst of being implemented. Yeah, I'll send the link to the article in CNET. And then I guess the question would be whether we want to look into it at all, but I was worried.
Yeah, I think that there's a large equity argument in favor of this bill, given our extreme heat days and the fact that people are dying from heat because they can't afford the electricity to turn on their air conditioner. So there's a lot going on statewide that's driving these kind of equity proposals. But at the same time, we have to look at all the outcomes together as a big picture, because mitigation is important to reducing the number of extreme heat days that we have in the future. Sorry, in case you haven't noticed, I now work for the California Department of Public Health in my off time from the committee.
Congratulations.
Read a lot. All right, so we are out of time. Please email any agenda items to Joshua and myself for either ideas for the retreat or desires for the retreat and or agenda items for November, because we may not be collecting agenda items. We might not be in the same frame of mind. Hopefully we won't be in the same frame of mind when we're at our October retreat in terms of thinking of things that we want. I'm assuming that the transportation survey probably will want to come back in November. Yes, Joshua.
Yeah, just a quick highlight of a couple of action items on the front. Everyone is encouraged to examine the Sustainable Sebastopol website update and look through it and think of suggestions or additions. There was one thing that came on as an aside during that conversation. I'm not where it landed, the sense that the committee webpage needs a listing of working groups and contacts for the working groups. That's in your court. Okay, thank you. And then finally, also, if everybody could think about the public engagement events and topics or approaches to that, and just bring suggestions for that to our next meeting. So just an encouragement for collective brainstorming.
Thank you so much. All right, thank you all for coming today. We will adjourn the meeting until October 12th at 3 p.m. at some unknown location.
Recording stopped.
Mm-hmm.